All right, we're back with game number 8. We're recording right after the last one. Deli has all of the 8-8 corners. Vid has coverage of one of them, but not the other. Vid has first turn. So, one type of player would say, I need to cover 2, 2, 8, 8, and 3, and would try to find a move that does so, whether or not it's the main thing that move is doing. I don't know if I'm that type of player. Let's look at Deli's hand. Vid is first turn, so I like to check the opponent's hand strength. He has eights in three directions and a couple sevens to the right. Does he drop off fast? Going up, he has 8, 7, 6, 5. That's pretty solid. Going down, he has 8, 6, 5, 4. Little less solid. Going left, he has three eights. Is there any cards that take advantage of that? No. And going to the right, he has two sevens and then a 2. No, a 3. I can count. So one instinct there is to go on the right side of the board and say, like, you're bad at going right. But if you look at Vid's hand, I'm not sure he wants to go right. And another thing is, because Deli has this weakness going right, anything he plays attacking stuff on the left will have low numbers facing out. So there's sort of two perspectives on playing against the opponent's direction. And I think most people adhere to the first one, which is safety. This means they're bad at attacking things here. Therefore, I will play where they're bad at attacking. But there is another perspective out there, at least in my head. Maybe no one else has it, which is if they are bad in a direction, then if you force them to take stuff, anything they take will have weak stuff facing out in the direction you're trying to attack. And so, for instance, Deli's sevens, maybe we note, oh, that A247, that not only has some plus wall potential against sevens to the right, but it might have some same or plus potential if there's like six or eights facing down. 8, 7 is a very good set of two numbers for playing off sevens. 6, 7 is also very good for playing off sevens. 7, 7 is not very good, right? It needs exactly a 7. But 6, 7, or 8, 7 gives you multiple numbers and frequent numbers that you can play off. Given Vid's hand is sort of bad going in various directions, I'm kind of thinking I want to start on the right side of the board. Do I have a good way to do so? Probably not. Do I have a card that I like that goes in 1 that covers Deli's move in 3? Probably not. Right? 4774 does so, but I have trouble recapturing that from 2, and they have an easy time recapturing that from 4. So I don't like ideas like that. And I think that's probably not great. Not the direction I was thinking, but maybe 7627 and 3 makes sense. Very easy to recapture in 6, and you have the lock in recapture in 2. But I think this is a huge concession. I think going on the right with a card that has your second most power to the right, and where you are planning to use next your card with the most power to the right, is a pretty sad way to live. Not really where you want to be. But what else is there? I think this is going to be a very tough game for Vid. 8, 4, 6, 4, and 7 says, okay, I still have a card that covers your move in 9. I have 8, 2, 4, 7. So I still have that covered. And if you go 2, 2, 8, 8, and 3, I can go 8, and you can't take this 8 facing up. I have a card that is safe as well. It's something. And I can do it while keeping 8247 and 6186, which means you don't have safety in 9. Now, I do hate this because that means you have to keep 6186 and 8247 in your hand as cards start going in 6 and 9, and those cards are just horrible in the endgame here. So I find that deeply unpleasant, but it is possible. You could play 8247 and 7 instead of 8464 because both of them have an 8 up and both of them. Yeah, so you could do it with 8247. Then you keep 8464. I'm not sure that's any better to hold in your hand. I think this is a really unpleasant starting spot, and I do not envy Vid being in it. Yeah. Oops. I'm curious to see what he does here. You saw my history of playing on Lichess. catastrophic that you saw such damning history. No one knew I played chess. Actually, I hit my a very high rating this morning on Lee Chess, which I'm very proud of. I've been working pretty hard on chess, basically for 4 months since the new year. Whenever this video comes out, it may be 4.5 months. Hopefully, I'm still working hard on chess. And this may not sound like improvement, but it is. I have almost set my peak rating. Um, uh, in the middle of last year, I had an insane run and set a peak rating. Just my peak rating before it was like 2720, and I got up to 2742, and then just did nothing like that near it, and then fell off a lot. And then I started working again at the start of this year, and I got up to 2720 some, and then I got up to 2730 some, and this morning I hit 2740. So I'm not going to play again till tomorrow because, again, we have other stuff we're doing. But if I happen to win my next game, which is like 60% chance or something, um, then I will set a new peak, which would be great. And I'd be very pleased because I've worked quite hard. Uh, and also, this is an offshoot and not important, but okay, he goes 8. Okay. Yeah, obviously this move is a concession, but you're behind, right? Um, you can capture anything they can play in 7 or 9, so maybe it's not that big a concession. Anything you play in 7 or 9, they can capture, but they have to capture with 2882, and you have play against that. So yeah, this now that Vid has played it, I'm like, yes, this move looks like a move which I am slightly unhappy to play. And given this hand and given everything I was looking at, I'm like, huge victory, great move, well done to Vid. Um, yeah. Now, maybe Deli's hand is clumsier than I thought. I just wasn't noticing any lines where we could take advantage of it. What was I talking about? Yes, improvement. Improvement is hard. And in chess, everyone is sort of evaluated by their ratings. Ratings vary site by site. So, like, 1800 on one site means something different on another site. There are studies that have looked at chess.com versus Lichess ratings, and they tend to be significantly inflated on Lichess until somewhere between 2000 and 2200, and then they tend to level out and be pretty similar, depending on time control. But something like that. Lichess has a higher starting baseline rating, but also because we don't need to talk about how rating distributions work, but most people find chess.com, which is, in my opinion, the infinitely inferior site in so many ways. Like, just enjoyment of use, how much free content there is, not getting like bombarded with constant ads. Chess.com is so gamified in such an obnoxious way if you actually care about improvement, and such a like addictive way to try to sucker in people who don't actually like chess. Anyway, that's just my opinion. I really don't like how chess.com works. I also hate the interface, and it's fine if you like the interface. It's not the end of the world. Also, chess.com ethically has a lot of problems that Lichess doesn't have. Okay, so many reasons. But of course, it's called chess.com. People find it. So it has the much wider user base, which means it has a lot more beginners, which does other things to affect the rating curve. Okay, not important. What is important is over the past almost a decade now, trying to improve at chess as an adult after having been good in high school and then not playing so much through college and the immediate aftermath of college. Um, I have improved in Lichess ratings about 40 points a year. Um, which is to say maybe 50. Um, which is to say I was somewhere in the 2150 to 2200 Lichess bullet range. There's been a little inflation on the site, so I'm not sure quite how much this means. But I was somewhere in the 2150 to 2200 range uh, in, say, 2018, 2017 maybe. And I am now, last year I averaged about 2640 performance for the year. Um, and this year I'm hoping to average around 2680. And I am not quite there yet, but we're not halfway through the year. Anyway, point is, I really try to improve each year, and I tend to put in work and make fairly substantial improvements. And it would mid last year I had a fantastic run, but a pretty short fantastic run. And it would be nice to break that with a more sustained run at that level. Because a lot of what improvement looks like isn't like, oh, suddenly I'm doing completely different things than I could ever do before. It's, oh, suddenly the day that was like, this is like a run of 3 days that are just the three best days of my life happened to happen in a row. I got really lucky. I was super sharp on like 3 or 4 consecutive days. Instead, it's like, oh, that number I could before only reach if everything went right and I got really lucky with like openings and time scrambles and everything going my way. Now, I can do that if I just have a bunch of quite good days, right? What was your 99th percentile day becomes your 90th percentile day, and then your 80th percentile day. And suddenly, milestones that like you hit it once and thought you could never return because you had the most insane streak, suddenly you start hitting it once a month or once a week, or you're regularly around there. And that's what improvement looks like. It's not most of the time. Now, tournaments are different because people tend to play tournaments infrequently, live tournaments, or play, one a month. And if you happen to have a great tournament, it does a big swing in your rating, and suddenly you're a whole new rating. But online play, it tends to be more how I just described. And yeah, I'm very pleased to be hitting numbers that at first I could only dream about, and then I could hit on the absolute best runs of my life. And now I can hit on really, really, really good runs. And maybe someday soon it'll be on good runs. And then it'll be like, oh, hey, this is relatively normal now. Eventually. And I do think that's what improvement looks like. Um, I like this aggressive side starter. As I said, I'm a big fan of aggressive sides. Um, I do wonder what happens if Deli makes the default 2288 and 3 move. Because obviously this position is still very unpleasant for Vid, but it at least creates some difficulties for the opponent. And if Deli does use 2288 up, maybe Vid is intending 7627 and one of 7 or 9, because that would now be safe. Because not only did Vid make a move that makes his cards at least do something, but he also made a move that has a reaction to Deli's move in 3. And it's subtle, right? Because a lot of times someone goes, they have a move in 3. Okay, I have to go in 1, 5, or 9 so I can set up in advance against it. And instead, he's going, not can I set up against the exact card, but the more interesting thinking of what does the card do? And what the card does is pressure downwards. So, how can I make it so that that card is important for Deli to keep in his hand? He can still use it. Vid is not fighting against the safety of the move. He is instead fighting against what that card can do. And it's really neat to see that. I'm going to assume he moved, though I did see that apparently the European servers went out for a sec, so it's possible he didn't. Okay, no, it was Deli's move, not Vid's move. But again, yeah, I think Deli has just played great and correctly this match. But Vid has found really interesting ideas. And in the battle between the consistent great play and great ideas, I think consistent great play tends to win. This is the story of my triple triad success, and in many ways, not always, but in many ways, is being a player who could consistently play at a very high level that didn't convince myself into taking too many risks. I think is a fair chunk of the story of my success. Um, so I am in no means complaining about Deli's play. I know I'm talking a lot more about Vid in these videos, but I think Vid's moves have been so interesting. Almost put 8128 and 2, but I'd never hear the end of it from Waz. Damn right you wouldn't. It's important to know that I'm influencing games by yeah. I know there are people that are a little uncomfortable with like being watched and sort of constantly evaluated by a watcher. And so I think I think me making these videos has obviously been good and nice for the community as a whole, but I'm sure there are instances where it's unpleasant for someone, and I am sorry about that. Um, I think that's a shame, and I don't really know what to do about it. I have been asked not to put up a video of a game, and I have then not put up the video of that game, for what that's worth. Uh, but obviously, like many people will feel bad about it and would be uncomfortable asking something like that. So obviously, this is not like a solution. And even if it was a solution, I have not, announced, hey, anytime you just don't want a video put up of a game, let me know. Because I don't think that would actually make it less uncomfortable. So, on the other hand, if Deli had played 8128 and 8, then I would start talking about how Deli's creative instead of talking about Vid the whole time. So, Deli, you lost your chance to make these videos about you. Um, I know Vid often plays in 5. Like, Vid likes J's more than I do. Um, but I think this is a tough hand and spot to go in 5. I usually go in 7 or 9 here. And specifically given how good Vid's coverage of 9 is, or either square, I think it's quite logical to do so. Um, Given that 8247 is not safe in 9 and 7627 is not safe in 9, and you want to keep 6186 up to cover space, I'm guessing 7. Stuff is making fun of me for talking about chess in my videos, which totally haven't done this video. Would never have done that this video. In my defense, I didn't make a chess quote or analogy. I instead just talked about how I am really pleased with my progress in chess at the moment. Um, which is to say, I have been sleeping really poorly for 2 months, and in the past week have started sleeping well, and magically, I'm playing a lot better at chess. It's almost like these things are connected. Um, but yeah, my all-time peak is 2742, and I am currently sitting on 2740. Be really cool to hit 2750. Honestly, though, if I lose my next 5 games and don't set the peak, that's fine. Um, I'll feel bad, but it's fine. The important thing is not peaks. All right, we're just going to talk about chess and how people think of themselves because your chess skill and everything is so like tied to your rating. Um, how people think of themselves and how our egos work becomes really tied to that, like the stupid 3 or 4 digit number. Okay, this is not the move I expected. Um, let's just say curious, and I'm going to keep talking about what I was talking about. Um, but did not expect this. That doesn't mean it's worse than what I expected, just did not expect this. Uh, I think maybe a problem he noticed was if he goes something safe in 7 and Deli goes 6, 3, 5, 8, and 9, he might have a problem capturing that because 6, 1, 8, 6, and 6 flips 3, and then Deli is a combo back in 2 with 5, 7, 6, 5. So I think what happened is I was going on general principles and Vid was calculating specific lines. And you should almost always favor the player who is calculating specific lines to the player who is going on general principles. So I suspect his move is better than whatever nonsense I was saying. Um, yeah, so you ask someone their rating, or they just give their rating because people talk about ratings constantly because, this is the number that says I am this worthy as a human being, which is just a shitty way to look at it, but it tends to be what we do. And someone says like, I'm a 1600, something like that. Now, back in the day before online took over, this meant I'm 1600 over the board. That's my live rating. My over the board, like real USCF, because I'm in the US rating. And you would like go look at their rating history. And like they say they're 1600. Their peak rating would be like 1560. And they would be currently 1510. And, like, but they have a friend who's 1600 and they once went even in a short match with them, that kind of thing. We will find ways to tell ourselves our number is bigger than it is, and this inflates our ego but can also do real damage, because then when we don't soon reach 1600 we go, this is unfair, why did this happen? I did that thing that proved to me I deserve this, but I'm not there. And this is sort of the wrong way of thinking about deserve and earning. And um it leads to many problems of like expectation. There was an incredibly promising kid. I had not made my jump to being one of the better kids in my age group yet. Um, so I played him when I was around 1200, and he was around 1700, and he's like a 1700 13-year old, which is very good. Not gonna be one of the all-time great players, but he's like very good for the age group. And his coach told him, "You're going to be 2000 in a year. Like, you clearly have the talent. You're going to be 2000 in a year." He played 2 tournaments that year. He gained like 10 points. Even if he had won both of those tournaments, he would have gained like 100 points. Um, he did not play enough that he could possibly have hit that expectation. And then he was incredibly frustrated and stopped playing chess because he had decided he was 2000, that he was like this thing, and it was just gonna happen. And the other thing was like you can't tell people they're gonna suddenly have this new rating, because it is a lot of work and it is hard, and sometimes we jump and sometimes we don't, and sometimes it pays off later and sometimes it doesn't. It's hard. This is uncertain. Getting better at things is difficult, and setting expectations like that is nuts. But where I was going was, you ask someone what their rating is, and whatever they tell you, you should know that is either their all-time peak rating, which is not their like current level or even general level or have much to do with it. It is how well one random run happened to go, or it is like their 80th percentile day. If you're a 1550 and some days you're up to 1600 and some days you're down to 1500, you do think of yourself as a 1600. You know, I think like most people think their normal level is like their 80th or 90th percentile level. And like even the most sort of rational balance types, it'll be like their 60th percentile. There are a few people who are like, I'm terrible, I'm overrated, but this is pretty rare. People who tend to stay with it tend not to have that kind of attitude. Um, this is to say, I every month check what my average rating was. Not my average rating, my performance for the month. Um, you can't even use the charts because the charts are what rating you ended on each day. And we all have biases towards stopping when we're on a high rating and keeping playing when we're on a low rating to get it up a bit. And this leads to charts being somewhat misleading. But there are things you can do that will take your total number of games and you get your performance for the month. Sorry, I haven't talked about Triple Triad at all today, but whatever. Um, and so I know what my performance is each month. I know what my performance is for the year. The peaks are really cool and they make you enthused to play more. But what matters is your general performance level. It's not how well you played in your best day or your best 3 days. It's what level you can maintain. What's your 50th percentile day? And I've also looked a little at the ranges of how much better my good days are than my bad days, which is just sort of interesting. Just like, how much do you change as a player in performance between your good and bad days? Only using as samples days where I played at least, I think I set the bar at 12 games. Some number of games where like it's going to be somewhat meaningful. Uh, but yeah, it's so interesting how much someone will go, I beat a player of this rating, therefore I deserve that rating, and will get so frustrated when they're not at that rating. And that is why I think it's useful to have a better sense of what improvement looks like. How improvement isn't like, you're a 1600, you beat an 1800 once, you're now 1800. Not how it works. You're a 1600, you should score 25% against 1800s. Whether you happen to win or lose any specific game does not tell you much about that. It tells you a little, not much. Um, I'm gonna guess we're headed for a tie here. But it is a little tricky because Vid doesn't really have a card that naturally slides into 6. Because he's got those 7s facing out, and those are problems. So maybe it's tricky here. I feel like the Vid move here is A2, 4, 7, and 5. Saying if you go in 6, I can combo back from 2. In fact, now that I say that, I just think that's going to happen. I think Vid's going to play A2, 4, 7, and 5. If Deli plays 6, Vid combos in 2. And even though Deli can combo through 6, he can't combo back because that 2 is not going to take anything to the right. And if Deli doesn't go in 6, if he goes somewhere like 4, then you block 6 with 7, 6, 2, 7, and 4, 7, 7, 4 is a great sweeper. So I think like A247 is very similar to a move Vid played in a previous game. It looks a lot worse because it sets up way less combo potential, but I think this one is just a safe tie while that one was a loss. So maybe that's a good idea. Yeah, back to expectations about oneself and like what improvement looks like and learning. Yeah, it's if you learn something like say I told you there was a new symbol, like we have addition, subtraction, division, multiplication, but there's a new symbol, blurg, something, whatever name, right? To deli something. Let's call it deliing. And deliing a number is like to square it and subtract 1 or something like that, right? And until I explain to you what deliing is, you can't deli at all. I mean, you could, but you don't know what it is. You don't know what it means. And once it's explained, it's like pretty straightforward to figure out the math and be able to do it. Just imagine something like that. Like, you know how addition and subtraction and multiplication work and you're taught division. Okay, it takes a little while to get a grasp on. It is tougher than the others in general, but like you get a grasp and at some point you can just do it. And in a lot of complex games like Triple Triad and chess, there's not quite the same kind of steps. And when there are steps, if you can just do it, there's steps that like don't show up that often. Like you can't apply them every game in the same way. With chess, there is opening theory, which is sort of an exception to this. But it means like getting better at something is like conglomerating all these little bits of knowledge and situational awareness and pattern recognition and thoughtfulness. And it usually doesn't all just magically click. Instead, it's this like, slow process of getting better. And I think setting expectations around how that works, at least for me, has been really useful to me in keeping motivated because you're going to have the periods that feel really good and you're like, I am a whole new player. I have set this line however far ahead of previous. And then you're going to have a shitty period after that. You see this actually a lot with Triple Triad tournament results. Is Deli saying 4, 7, 7, 4, and 1 is winning? Or just saying he thinks that move is cute? Well, I'm not going to figure out what Deli is talking about. If I was Vid, I would have thought about a bunch more things than I've thought about, but I would probably conclude I'm not going to win this game, and I would play A2, 4, 7, and 5, or something like it that I was just confident is a tie. I think you do see it a bunch with tournament results. There have been a bunch of players who they have a deep run, and then they have a couple tournaments they go out round 1 or round 2, and then they stop. And before the deep run, they may have played a lot of tournaments, but them stopping is clearly correlated with them having a deep run, right? They played like 6 tournaments. They never went particularly far. They make a finals in their 7th tournament. They are more likely to stop within the next 2 tournaments, like after the next 2 tournaments they played, I think, than if they had had another early exit. That might be wrong. I might be having confirmation bias here because there's examples of that, and the examples of someone who went out round one 8 times in a row and stopped, I'm not going to remember as well. But it's just really easy to set radical expectations for yourself. And the thing is, like, no one averages a tournament finals, at least for their career. Some will for like short runs at their peak. But like one deep run means a bunch of things came together. And it could have been rule sets, it could have been the path you happen to have to get there, it could have been your opponents having bad days, it could have been you having good days. It could have been, again, rule sets could mean like you specifically were better at the specific rules to play, or your hand came together and lined up really well against theirs. Um, there's so many things that can go right or wrong in a round. And there's also, you could have just won a lot of coin flips, right? If you are 50% against your opponents, what are the odds you like win 3 in a row and make a semifinals or finals? Well, you're going to do it 1 out of every 8 times. Say you play 8 tournaments and 1 you make that semifinals finals run. And it was consistent opposition the whole way. You're going to be like, that was the time I played great. And you probably did play better that time. But also, it could just be you won all the coin flips. And yeah, consistency over time is really important. Vid makes the move Deli said, so now we actually have to think about it, which I had assumed I wasn't going to have to do. I had thought, I don't think I'll have to do this, so I'm simply not going to. So 1 point is 8247 might sweep the endgame here. Because any card Deli can put in 5, 8247 combos from 6. But that doesn't seem that meaningful to me. To be honest, I don't get this. What if Deli blocks 2? What if Deli says, okay, you set up a plus and 2, I'm simply going to block 2. What's the plan? So let's say, for just to put in a move, let's say 5, 7, 6, 5, and 2. Maybe that's just a tie. But if 5, 7, 6, 5, and 2, if you play 8, 2, 4, 7 in 4, no, you don't need to play 8, 2, 4, 7 in 4. I guess you can play 7, 6, 2, 7, and then 8, 2, 4, 7 is actually a pretty good sweeper. Okay, and Deli has no downs, so we can't actually flip 9 or 8. Oh, maybe this is promising. Maybe this is promising. Deli says, ugh, this might hold. All right, well, my brain's gone. He's saying 5, 7, 6, 5, and 6, maybe. We're going to pop open the solver. I used up all my brain on the last game. You can tell when I'm just giving up on thinking because I will start talking about other things. And then I usually won't come back. If it's like a quick analogy, then I might still be there. But if it's here is what I've been thinking about, and I just want to babble about that, no, I am gone. All right, so Deli says no, 5, 7, 6, 5 does not hold. My bet without doing much calculation is still he should go in 2. Okay, so there were 6 ties on move 4. He did play a tie. So I would have played 8, 2, 4, 7, and 5 if I was Vid, presumably, which is a tie. But Vid plays 4, 7, 7, 4, and 1. And there is 1 tie here. Oh no. Oh no. Okay, so 2 doesn't tie. There is 1 tie here. This was a great move. My move in 2 loses to 7, 6, 2, 7, and 4. For some reason, I thought Deli had to play 8, 2, 4, 7 there to recapture 1. And then I got confused once I realized he didn't have to and stopped thinking. But 8, 2, 4, 7 does actually sweep that endgame, and he doesn't have to recapture 1 there. So 2 doesn't hold. There is 1 tie here. The problem is Deli just said it. Deli said 5, 7, 6, 5, and 6, which is the 1 tie. but then he said a2 4 7 and 2 wins, but it doesn't. I'll flip you over and show you the solver here. I can do that. So here's the position, and like something like this, we can see loses. Hopefully you can see. You can see this wins. You can look at it. This is what I was just talking about. Deli mentioned 5 7 6 5 and 6, and this is the one tie. But he said it loses to a2 4 7 and 2. It doesn't because of this, just barely tying. But the problem is, this may mean, we're now going to come back to the game, this may mean he has dismissed it. He has ruled that 5 7 6 5 and 6 doesn't work, and will potentially only check other moves for the rest of his time. One of the worst things that can happen in your thinking is you're in a position where there's one tie, and you have the right instinct, and you rule it out and never return to it. Now, I think he will find out it works. Okay, so sorry. He says, "Oh wait, no, it doesn't." Haha. So okay, he has found it. He didn't do the thinking problem. He made sure. He came back. He thought responsibly. He had good instincts. He will survive this game. But oh, I think it's so scary when that happens. I think it's so scary when you rule out something early, and because it's now not in your head, you're only checking other moves, and you maybe start rechecking those other moves, but that first thing you ruled out, it's easy to feel is ruled out forever. And I think he has not done that, but that's why I said oh no, was because he had said the right move didn't work. And once you decide the right move doesn't work, that is when Triple Triad is at its scariest. But he found it and he has played it. And he played it quite quickly, actually, for Deli. We're definitely stopping after this game. I'm not. My analysis at this point is non-existent. I'm gonna start putting the game into my database. Nice game. The move in one that both of them pointed out, because Deli mentioned it and also Vid played it. Really good move that I just, again, it's not on my radar at all. I would have just been like, let's find a tie. Deli says barely got there. Wanted to play 6 3 5 8 and 4. And I don't know why that wouldn't have tied because my brain is gone, but we know that wouldn't have tied because we did check with the solver. And the solver is still never been wrong, which is to say it just works. But when I was first using the solver, every position I would like have to play out for myself just to make sure because I didn't trust it whenever it said something at all strange. I'd be like, does that really work? Let's have it prove it against me. And just every time it would prove it, but I continued to disbelieve for a while. I think by the time I was using it for videos, I believed in it, but there was definitely like a week or something where I just like checked a ton of things, and just everything I checked I was like, grr, I'm gonna make this wrong. And yeah, never was. Or I mean, it never was, but if it had been, also I was incapable of proving it. um, so okay, we're gonna stop here. If they keep playing, we'll catch the rest of this game, but if they keep playing, I will not be catching it today. Do, do, do. What else is going on that we can talk about instead of the game? Ah, God, my analysis. I think I was quite interesting last game and just gone this one. Um, StarCraft, the ASL is happening, which is the big tournament that happens a few times a year. We currently are in the final 8, so spoilers if you happen to be watching that, which no one who watches this is, and haven't watched stuff that happened, I guess, like 3 weeks ago. But we're in the top 8, and the first match of the top 8, which is the only one I've seen, though the second match has happened. Um, Second match, God, the odds. I could have made so much money betting on that. Then it's going to turn out the upset actually happened. But okay. The first match was a player named Queen versus a player named Best. And Queen used to go by the name Zero. Korean players are terrible at SEO, search engine optimization. They'll not all of them, but a lot of them will just constantly change their names, often to terrible things. There was a player named Shuttle who won a tournament, so it was a very important player, and changed their name to Eye Water. I guess they thought it was a cool way to say tears, like the English words, eye water. Terrible name, like horrifically, amusingly bad name. Like if you log on to a forum and you see someone named Shuttle, you're like chat or whatever. Like you're like, okay, that's a name. You see someone named Eyewater, you're like, what are you doing? Changes their name to Eyewater. It's demanded everyone calls them that. Like a tournament or two later, they're like, that was stupid and goes back to Shuttle. But like this kind of change happens all the time. That's just an egregious example. So there was this player named Zero, and Zero is a Zerg. StarCraft is a game with 3 races. Zergs are these alien bug things. Terrans are humans, and Protoss are futuristic mech stuff. Zerg is the best. Zero's a Zerg. Zero wins 2 tournaments in a row, which is a crazy good achievement, and does it utilizing a strategy. I don't fully understand StarCraft very well. So, okay. I shouldn't say I don't fully understand StarCraft. I don't understand StarCraft very well. I have fun watching it. I think it's cool. I have no skill at it. We've done some StarCraft 2, but StarCraft 1 is very different. So he wins 2 tournaments in a row, and he does it utilizing a unit, the Queen. And Queens are a very important unit in StarCraft 2, and they do a completely different thing in StarCraft 1 that was largely thought to be basically useless. They have a bunch of different abilities that basically don't do enough. But he had figured out in one specific matchup that he could use them really usefully. Essentially, they were an anti-tank thing. It's neat that Vid plays the move that Deli was temporarily scared of. Good for Vid. Um, and he uses the unit Queens, and then after winning these 2 tournaments, he changes his name to Queen. Okay. So now his name is Queen. And after that, he has this incredibly bad run for the last few years. The main tournament involves 24 players. 4 players get seeded in, and the next 20 have to qualify. The top 4 each tournament get into the next one, but the next 20 have to qualify. And not only did he fail to qualify sometimes or go out in the round of 24, the first round, he would also, which is like really bad for someone who won 2 in a row, but he also lost to some like amateur players, like not even like low level pros, but just like straight up amateurs, like people who play sometimes on weekends kind of thing. And this is just terrible, like really embarrassing for him, and everyone made fun of it. Um, he looks to be in very good form right now. So he's our first player. He seems to be back. We get a tie in this game. You know what? Should we finish the story or should we just stop? I should probably just stop. I'll be quick. So he's one player, really interesting, innovative player that 4 years ago or however many years ago was like top of the world for a bit, and has been really slumping since, but is playing really well right now. And some of the English broadcasters think he's like top 3 to 5 in the world right now. Just really been crushing it and looks like maybe back in the form he was in. Verse Best. Best is a Protoss, that's the futuristic mechs. You can really tell when I'm going off like this. My brain's gone for triple triad. I'm on autopilot talking about just whatever's in my head. All right. Best is a Protoss who, according to the commentators, I've only really watched the last 3 seasons. I know so little, but I like reading up on stuff, so I can pretend I know a little more, but everything I say, you should be like, that's probably not true. Or that is just repeating what like one commentator says over and over again and is kind of simplistic and not true. But Best is allegedly one of the 5 best Protoss in the world for like 18 years at this point. 17, 16, something like that. A really remarkable run. He has never won a major tournament. I think he is not usually one of the best 2 or 3 Protoss. But maybe he has been. And it's just not apparent to me from the stats I've looked at. But very good for a very long time. And one of the commentators who I've watched says about him, and this has been true in the last few matches I've watched, so I'm going to pretend it's generally true, but it could easily be some small sample thing. He plays really well when behind and really badly when ahead. And that is the perfect recipe for playing a lot of exciting games. Because he gets ahead, he'll fuck it up. He gets behind, he will play great and make it an interesting match. Um, so that makes for kind of fun matches. I didn't know who I was rooting for coming in. My friend who got me into StarCraft, his favorite player is Queen or Zero, whatever you want to call him. But I am sort of a jerk, so if my friend likes rooting for someone, I will sometimes just root against them. I'm not sure where I'm going on this one. I didn't know how I felt coming into this match. I thought Zero would win, but I didn't know who I wanted to win. And in game one, I thought, and again, my interpretations are so not necessarily what's happening. I thought Zero firmly outplayed Best, and then Best got pretty lucky to get the win in game one. So it made me think, okay, Best is up 1-0, but Zero's the better player. And then Zero wins game two and game three. And then they play a really messy, strange, complicated game four that obviously I just do not remotely understand. And Zero won again to take a 3-1 lead. And it was like, okay, yeah, Zero is just better. Zero has played better in maybe all four games, maybe all but game four. Game four was really, again, I'm not going to be the guy who can judge that. But like, yeah, Zero's better. And in game five, Best pulls out a cannon rush, which is basically a cheese, basically a if you go too economic, I'm just going to beat you. And if you go military, I'm probably just going to lose on the spot. It's very much this gamble of if I caught you in the right build, I'm going to win. If I didn't, I'm probably going to lose. There's a bunch of things where there's still a balanced game to happen. And Zero, you could tell, got so bothered. Zero like had the right setup to respond and screwed up some of the inputs at the start of it, I think is what happened. And then got really flustered. And you could see him moving his head around and just really unhappy. And then like doing things frustratedly. And Best ends up getting a really big advantage out of it. Incidentally, Best cannon rushes more than any other top Protoss. Um, which you could say is sort of gambling cheese, but I actually think like the top players sort of underutilize cheeses. Because the thing about cheeses is if you never cheese, then they can play a lot more economically because there's no risk of just dying to these very quick attacks. Um, and so by balancing your range, by doing a larger variety of things, you can force them into not having an easier time figuring out the opening. And one of the really cool things Sulky does, Sulky is the best player of our time, um, has won three in a row, and many think is huge favorite to win a fourth. Um, Sulky does a way better job of inserting silly attacks that like a much worse player could execute to force you to kind of stay honest. You don't There are so many more things in his range and he does them with greater variety that it is difficult to figure out where you want to be against. While if someone does, I do these two or three things, it's a lot easier to figure out something that's going to perform really well against those two or three things. So I think this is a good trade at best. So he plays this cannon rush. Queen gets so flustered. Best gets a big advantage. Queen sort of comes back a bit, but it's not near enough. And Best wins game five. And then I didn't pay a lot of attention in game six, but Best wins again. So now it's 3-3. And my firm conclusion at this point is Zero is significantly better than Best. Like, I think clearly the better player. And I don't know if he's still favorite. He was so frustrated looking in game five. Game six went quite badly for him. He just doesn't look like he's playing very well anymore. Um, and game seven was another pretty complicated one, but Best wins it, and Best takes the match 4-3, having gone down 3-1. And I think having been outplayed in every one of those four games and being kind of lucky not to be just swept 4-0, ends up winning 4-3. And so if you're from the perspective of like, I always want the better player to win, then I think you did not get what you want from this match because I think Queen Zero/Queen is the better player. If you go like whoever won must have played better, I don't agree with that. I think Zero, you know, showed himself to be the better player. But I thought it was a really cool comeback, and I've also not Usually in StarCraft, when someone wins, the commentators will attribute psychological things to the loser and be like, they shouldn't have done this. And oftentimes it's just like, no, the other person was better at strategic decisions, was better at tactical interactions. Not every difference in result is about psychology. There are real differences in all kinds of not just decision making, but how those decisions are implemented and the skills around those. And we do not have to psychologize everything. Like, if Delhi loses the next game, is it because he got nervous about something? No, I don't know why it is, but it's probably not that. Um, it's probably just their skill levels, meaning Delhi loses some positions, wins a lot of other positions, etc., etc. But it was really kind of fun to watch someone like in a like watching sporting way as a person like you probably should feel a little bad for them to watch someone just like you see this with the player mini as well. To watch someone get unhappy with the direction of the game and start making just bad decisions, and the other player, even though I think best is like technically worse, like less skilled at just technical control stuff, and worse at general strategic decisions, being able to win was pretty exciting. Um, yeah, so fun sports stuff.